The crackle of tearing rigging merges with death cries. In a secluded bay, hemmed in by black rocks, the water rapidly turns thick and crimson. A still trembling eyewitness whispered of colossal shadows in the gloom. Gigantic silhouettes mercilessly hurled entire cliffs onto fragile wooden ships. Hidden within the darkest pages of humanity's most ancient epic is this soul-chilling nightmare, an episode that storytellers have only whispered for centuries. Today, we embark on our journey to the cursed Telepylos. This is the ominous abode of the Laestrygonians, chthonic giants from which mortals do not return. Yellowed scrolls and forgotten grimoires hold a terrible truth. Their true nature lies in the primordial chaos that spawned the most merciless monsters. Their true nature lies in the primordial chaos that spawned the most merciless monsters. Their terrifying appearance evokes a primal dread. The stature of these giants surpasses the masts of the largest galleys, and their faces are contorted with untamed fury. Ancient chroniclers described their coarse, impenetrable skin with a shudder. It was like the tanned hide of primeval leviathans covered in deep cracks and stony growths. An ordinary blade merely slid across it, leaving not even a scratch, rendering any warrior utterly defenseless. But most terrifying of all are their eyes. In the gloom of the narrow fjords, they glow with a dull yellow light, betraying an eternal, insatiable hunger. This heavy, hypnotic gaze is devoid of the slightest glimmer of humanity. It paralyzes the will of sailors, forcing them to wait in stupor for their inevitable doom. Their monstrous physical strength defies comprehension. According to chronicles darkened by time, an enraged Laestrygonian can uproot an ancient oak or tear a thick anchor chain with bare hands. Their muscles seem carved from black granite, granting them devastating power. Nature endowed these creatures with gruesome instruments of murder. Their long, curved claws and massive fangs are designed solely to easily tear warm flesh. Every detail of their anatomy emphasizes their status as absolute merciless predators, for whom humans are merely food. Even in the secret texts of the Lesser Key of Solomon, there is a hidden hint of their chthonic origin. The darkened pages state, "There are spirits of the earth, clothed in the flesh of rocks, whose fury knows no bounds." These lines clearly point to the Laestrygonians, whose birth is cursed by the heavens. Their hunting tactics inspire chilling terror. Laestrygonians do not engage in open pursuit. They can silently wait in ambush for hours on the peaks of foggy cliffs. Merging with the dark stone, they become an invisible threat, delivering their deadly and inevitable strike. Their main weapons are heavy, sharp boulders. With terrifying precision, they hurl these enormous stone slabs from sheer cliffs. One such projectile can shatter a sturdy ship, instantly transforming the pride of the ancient fleet into a bloody mess of wood and flesh. During an attack, the giants display a gruesome pack instinct. They act in concert, without a single command, obeying a dark, silent understanding. This is not a chaotic mob of savages, but a deadly swarm where each giant clearly knows its role in the bloody harvest of doomed humans. Pleading for mercy from them is utterly futile. Laestrygonians fundamentally do not understand the human language of mercy or compassion. For them, the bitter tears and cries of victims are merely background noise, devoid of any meaning. Their cold, primal minds are focused solely on satisfying their dark hunger. Human flesh for them is not just food, but a sacred resource. In their grim philosophy, devouring foreigners grants them vital energy and a connection to the dark gods of the underworld. Each consumed sailor makes these giants even stronger, reinforcing their primal power. Spilled blood plays a crucial ritual role in their closed society. Thick, crimson liquid washes over the black stones of the bay, serving as an offering to the spirits of the abyss. This cruel rite binds the tribe, transforming each massacre into a gruesome sacred act where only blind worship of death itself reigns. The tools of the Laestrygonians are astonishing in their scale. These are roughly hewn stone harpoons, comparable in size to the spears of ancient titans. Carved from solid basalt blocks, they serve to pierce giant sea creatures and doomed ships caught in their deadly, bloody trap. Their enormous bodies are covered with the tough hides of unknown sea monsters dwelling at the bottom of the cursed bay. This scaly armor, soaked in salt and blood, serves as their reliable protection. It emits a nauseating stench of decay that sailors detect even before the giants themselves appear. Despite their colossal build, Laestrygonians move across sheer cliffs with terrifying agility. Like giant spiders, they cling to barely visible ledges, silently gliding along the vertical walls of the fjord. This unnatural, fluid grace makes them ideal, elusive killers in the stone labyrinth. Their tanned skin possesses an absolute, terrifying imperviousness to ordinary mortal blades. Neither gleaming bronze nor forged iron can penetrate this natural armor. Weapons clang off it, leaving seafarers utterly defenseless against their impending, inevitable death. At the head of this primal nightmare stands Antiphates, the most colossal and ferocious of the giants' rulers. Ancient chronicles state that his roar shook mountains, and a single blow from his heavy, gnarled hand was enough to shatter all living things. Antiphates' wife caused foreigners chilling stupor with her mere appearance. This gigantic woman, whose size chroniclers compared to a mountain cliff, knew no pity. Her dark, unblinking gaze paralyzed the will, turning brave warriors into tearfully pleading victims. In despair, the doomed seafarers applied ancient, half-forgotten amulets to the masts of their ships. They carved sacred symbols and generously doused them with sacrificial blood, naively hoping these signs would ward off the chthonic monsters and protect their decrepit vessel from destruction. To conceal the pulsating scent of living flesh, wise helmsmen burned dry wormwood and black heather on the decks. Thick, bitter smoke spread over the leaden water, attempting to deceive the senses of predators eagerly sniffing out their warm, utterly defenseless prey in the darkness. Laestrygonians do not scream. They emit a low, vibrating hum that resonates deep within the chest of the doomed victim. This guttural sound, akin to the grinding of colliding tectonic plates, portends the same certain death. It paralyzes the mind, stripping a person of hope. Their endurance defies human comprehension. These giants can pursue their prey for days without closing their heavy eyelids or knowing fatigue. Their dark silhouettes relentlessly follow, turning escape into an exhausting torment whose outcome is predetermined. The giants' attitude towards fire is purely pragmatic. They do not warm themselves by the flame nor honor it as a divine gift. Fire is needed by them exclusively for one gruesome purpose. On it, they roast their bloody meat, impaled on colossal spits. At the bottom of the Aegean Sea, divers still find blackened amulets with protective runes. These time-worn stones are silent witnesses to all the primal terror experienced by ancient sailors as their fragile vessels inexorably sank. Even the great mystic Albertus Magnus, in his secret works, tried to unravel the secret of these monsters' impenetrable skin. He hypothesized that its structure was imbued with heavy earth metals and the salt of dead seas, making it stronger than any armor forged by mortals. Their nature is inextricably linked to dark waters and chthonic, subterranean forces. The Laestrygonians are not merely a tribe of giants. They are the living wrath of the very depths of the earth. They draw their primal fury from black, bottomless fissures hidden beneath the waves of the cursed bay. Ancient legends state that their collective wrath can conjure localized, destructive storms. When the Laestrygonians fall into a rage, the sky above the fjord is shrouded in a black veil, and leaden waves surge to the very tops of the cliffs, cutting off any path of retreat for doomed ships. Their dwellings are colossal, damp caves, delving deep into the heart of black basalt rocks. There, in the darkness, where everything is permeated by the suffocating stench of decaying flesh and ancient dampness, lie the true gates to an underground, merciless world from which there is no return. The entrances to these cavernous halls are adorned with soul-chilling trophies. Thousands of salt-bleached skulls of torn sailors are stacked into macabre pyramids. These bone mounds serve as a stark warning to every madman who dared to cast anchor in the deceptively calm waters of cursed Telepylos. Devouring an enemy for the Laestrygonians is not merely satisfying hunger, but a dark, sacred rite. Tearing out and consuming the still-beating heart of a victim, they believe they absorb its life force. This bloody ritual forever links them to primal, chthonic cults. Among occultists, persistent rumors circulate about the incredible, terrifying longevity of these giants. Their age is measured not in hundreds, but in many millennia. They witnessed times when gods still walked the earth and preserved in their black blood the memory of the most ancient chaos. In their primitive yet utterly indestructible philosophy, the fear of death is completely erased. Laestrygonians know no doubt and no retreat. They hurl themselves at ships bristling with spears with a cold, blind indifference to their own wounds, making them truly invincible adversaries. Any attempts to befuddle their minds are doomed to cruel failure. Laestrygonians possess an innate, natural resistance to magic and charms. No illusions or hypnotic siren songs can cloud their clear, primal, beastly instinct, focused solely on the bloody hunt. Their few shamans do not weave complex spells. They appeal directly to the elements. Howling eerily from the cliff tops, they summon a thick, supernatural fog. This white shroud reliably conceals the cursed bay from foreign eyes, transforming it into a perfect, deadly trap. In conclusion, it can be confidently stated, the Laestrygonians appear before us as absolute, unrivaled predators of the ancient world. They are not merely a savage tribe, but a perfect killing machine, created by the darkest nature to cruelly punish mortals for their hubris. But where does this primal nightmare hide? Leaving behind the gruesome anatomy of the giants, we turn to the true geography of horror. Our goal is to find the real coordinates of the cursed city of Telepylos, whose name made even the bravest ancient seafarers blanch. Ancient chronicles describe the great paradox of Telepylos. It is a mystical place where the paths of day and night intersect in an unbreakable knot. Homer whispered that a shepherd returning in the evening here meets one who is just driving the flock out into the dewy morning dawn. Esoteric treatises of the Orphics interpret this phenomenon not as a geographical anomaly. Telepylos is a gaping tear in the very fabric of reality, where time loses its linear flow and space distorts, forming a dead loop from which there is no escape. If we examine yellowed Venetian portolans and secret Templar sea charts, we will discover a soul-chilling detail. This ominous bay was always marked with thick black ink, without a single name, only with a short Latin warning: "Here dwells certain death." The fjord itself is a perfect natural trap. A narrow, barely visible entrance from the sea is securely squeezed between colossal, absolutely smooth cliffs. These black, insurmountable walls rise high into the heavens, forever cutting off any hope of salvation for those who enter. The trap snaps shut thanks to the deceptive tranquility of an ideal harbor. Inside the fjord, there is not a single wave, not the slightest breath of wind. This dead, mirrored surface creates in storm-weary sailors a sweet yet absolutely deadly illusion of long-awaited safety and warm lodging. The impenetrable leaden waters of this cursed bay reliably guard their grim secrets. Deep on the muddy bottom, in eternal cold darkness, lie the broken remains of thousands of torn ships. Their decaying ribs are intertwined with the bleached bones of those who sought refuge here. An analysis of the rarest Phoenician maps of Sardinia indicates that this wild island might have concealed the true location of the Laestrygonians' land. The northern rugged coasts of Corsica and Sardinia still harbor grim, unexplored caves of cyclopean dimensions. Frightening accounts from Roman chroniclers, such as Pliny the Elder, have survived. He mentioned cursed, forbidden lands on the fringes of the Tyrrhenian Sea. Imperial galleys never ventured into those gloomy waters, fearing the wrath of entities whom the legionaries called devourers of entire cohorts. On the desolate, windswept shores of the Mediterranean, archaeologists still find the ruins of so-called cyclopean masonry. These are colossal, roughly hewn blocks laid without a single drop of mortar into gigantic walls, whose true age no scholar dares to name. The mass of these basalt megaliths is such that it was physically impossible to erect them with the hands of ordinary mortal men. Neither ancient block systems nor thousands of slaves could have moved these stones. They were laid by those for whom gravity was but a trifle. A special place in ancient grimoires is occupied by the study of the ancient spring of Artacia. It was by these crystal waters that Odysseus's scouts met the gigantic daughter of the Laestrygonian chief. This place is described as a fateful watering hole where primal horror first took on flesh. Herein lies the deep, grim symbolism of ancient mythology. Fresh water, considered a sacred source of life since time immemorial, here turned into a direct, inevitable path to agonizing death. The thirst for salvation led the doomed sailors directly into the gaping maw of chthonic monsters. If we attempt to decipher Odysseus's final route using Claudius Ptolemy's hidden star charts, we encounter an inexplicable paradox. The lines of navigation abruptly end, disappearing into a blind spot, as if the ships had fallen into a rift between worlds, where the familiar sky had vanished forever. At the supposed coordinates of Telepylos, modern researchers record gruesome magnetic anomalies. Compass needles begin to spin chaotically, and ancient copper astrolabes, recovered from the seabed, seem magnetized by an unknown force. The very earth here fiercely rejects any attempts at rational measurement. The flora of this cursed fjord inspires genuine horror. Ancient botanical treatises describe black, painfully twisted trees, devoid of foliage. Their powerful, gnarled roots delve deep into the rocks, greedily feeding on the abundantly spilled blood of thousands of torn foreigners, absorbing their dying fear. The fauna of Telepylos frightens with its ringing emptiness. Birds are completely absent here. There is not a single cry of a seagull or a trace of a wild beast. All living things were long ago and mercilessly devoured by the insatiable giants, leaving behind only dead silence and bare stones. And only the monstrous tracks of enormous bare feet, forever petrified in cold volcanic tuff, serve as silent testimony to their presence. These impressions, pressed into the rock, are so vast that rainwater collects in them, forming dark, ominous puddles at the edge of the precipices. Geological study of the composition of heavy stones found in the wreckage of ancient galleys is awe-inspiring. These deadly projectiles, with which the Laestrygonians crushed decks, consist of deep, super-dense magmatic rock. Only a truly demonic, inhuman force could have torn such boulders from the cliffs. In the closed archives of the British Admiralty, reports of secret 19th century expeditions are kept. Occultists and seekers of ancient mysteries set out in search of Telepylos, but all of them vanished without a trace. The cursed fjord reliably guards its secrets, devouring everyone who dares to disturb its slumber. Yellow diaries of Renaissance seafarers who miraculously escaped death shudderingly describe the ominous, thick fogs of the Mediterranean. These milky white vapors, smelling of decaying seaweed and rust, like living tentacles, enveloped galleys, drawing them towards black, invisible rocks where an ancient, hungry death lay in wait. At the very tops of these impregnable cliffs hide ancient pagan shrines, built from rough megaliths. Their rough surface is thickly coated with layers of dried, almost black blood. These gruesome altars served as places of offerings to unknown chthonic deities, whose names are terrifying to utter even in a whisper. The Laestrygonians did not use words for coordination during the hunt. They communicated through a system of colossal signal fires, flaring up on the edges of precipices. Columns of thick, suffocating smoke by day and a crimson glow by night served as a silent command for the beginning of a merciless, bloody harvest in the bay. Deep within the basalt mountains hide enormous storage caves permeated with the scent of primal horror. It was here that the Laestrygonians kept their doomed captives, treating them as mere livestock. In this utter darkness, people awaited their terrible, inevitable fate on spits for days. But there is a frightening paradox in Telepylos, the famous freshwater spring of Artatia. The cruel cannibal giants maniacally guarded its crystal, icy purity. Not a single drop of sacrificial blood was to defile these sacred waters, which nourished the dark essence of their cursed primal land. Ancient mystics believed that this untouched purity of the spring was no accident. Telepylos was in direct mystical connection with the gates to the underworld, the dark realm of Hades. The water of Artatia is the tears of the earth itself, seeping from deep Tartarus, where ancient monsters languish. The name Lamos, the legendary and terrifying founder of the Laestrygonian city, still evokes awe in researchers of ancient texts. Translated from forgotten dialects, it means gaping maw or abyss. This ruler was not merely a chief, but a living embodiment of all-consuming emptiness. Fragments of ancient legends state that Lamos himself was the rejected son of a dark, enraged Poseidon. The god of the seas spawned this giant in a fit of blind fury to punish overly arrogant mortals. This is why the sea element always favored the Laestrygonians, driving ships into their deadly nets. Rumors claim that archaeological finds of giant bones with traces of monstrous mutations are securely hidden in the deepest basements of the Vatican. For centuries, the Church has confiscated these gruesome artifacts so as not to disrupt the familiar worldview and to conceal the true chthonic horror of our distant past. The only visual evidence remains the gruesome ancient frescoes found in the ruins of a villa on the Esquiline. On these crumbling walls, with terrifying realism, the bloody massacre in the Bay of Telepylos is depicted. The artist meticulously conveyed the chilling chaos: crushed galleys, dark crimson waves, and towering gigantic silhouettes. A detailed analysis of these frescoes reveals a shocking contrast. On the faces of the doomed sailors, an indescribable, feature-distorting horror is frozen. Meanwhile, the giants' postures express only cold, routine indifference. For the Laestrygonians, this is not a furious battle, but merely an ordinary, methodical slaughter of livestock. Strikingly, ancient artists were terrified of depicting the faces of the Laestrygonians. Instead of features, there were only dark, blurred smudges or crude masks. It was believed that an accurate depiction of a monster's gaze could curse the creator himself, drawing dark entities from those very cursed fjords into his life. Grimoires warn of an ancient curse befalling anyone who seeks Telepylos for worldly glory. Those who tried to calculate the coordinates of the bloody bay ended their existence in madhouses, constantly muttering about gigantic shadows mercilessly squeezing their weak throats on silent nights. Ancient astronomers whispered that the night sky above this cursed fjord was distorted. The stars there seemed alien, dim, and never changed position, as if time over Telepylos had completely stopped. It is a dead dome over a place where the laws of creation were mercilessly torn apart. The very shape of the bay creates an ominous acoustic anomaly. Smooth basalt walls generate multiple, deafening echoes. The death cries of victims and the crunch of breaking ship pines are amplified 1,000-fold, transforming into a single, maddening roar that paralyzes the will even before the first stone strike. On the coast of Corsica, divers found strange artifacts, twisted remains of ancient bronze rams, fused immovably into the coastal black rocks. The force of the impact was so colossal that the metal merged with the stone, forever capturing the moment when a giant hand hurled a heavy boulder directly at a trireme. Occult manuscripts mention strange, anomalous underwater currents approaching Telepylos. These invisible whirlpools, like the tentacles of a giant kraken, silently seized the keels of doomed ships, inexorably dragging them directly into the narrow throat of the trap, even if the wind blew in the opposite direction. This mystical, frightening isolation of Telepylos from the rest of the ancient world defies logic. The city of the Laestrygonians existed as if in a parallel, grim dimension, accessible only by fateful chance or by the malicious intent of cruel gods indifferent to human suffering. Wild nature itself became a loyal ally of the giants, helping to conceal traces of their habitation. Impenetrable thorny forests and poisonous lianas form a dense wall around the land approaches to the fjord. The roots of ancient trees greedily sink into the blood-soaked earth, reliably hiding the bones of torn sailors. Telepylos forever remains an eternal, unshakable monument to primal, utterly insurmountable horror. It is not merely a point on an ancient map, but a gaping wound on the body of mythology, a cursed fjord where human pride was trampled by a giant bare foot, and civilization choked in its own dark blood. Delving deeper into dark archives, we inevitably encounter a frightening comparative analysis. The Laestrygonians were not an isolated Mediterranean nightmare. If we unroll the decayed scrolls of other civilizations, we will discover ominous parallels, comparing these chthonic giants with other mythological giants of antiquity. The cardinal difference between the Laestrygonians and the Cyclops lies in their terrifying social structure. If the one-eyed shepherds embodied savagery and chaotic solitude, the inhabitants of Telepylos demonstrated their ruthless unity. They killed like a perfectly organized, deadly legion. Ancient grimoires draw a direct comparison with the Titans. The Laestrygonians appear not merely as large cannibals, but as living fragments of the most ancient era of primordial chaos. They carry within them the very primal power that once made all creation tremble. We find frightening parallels with the Norse Jötnar, the ice and stone giants of the north. Like the Laestrygonians, they are eternally hostile to the order of the bright gods. These giants lurk at the borders of the known world, awaiting the moment to unleash their heavy wrath upon mortals. No less ominous is the analysis of the Celtic Fomorians, monstrous inhabitants of the Dark Sea. Ancient Irish sagas describe them as ruthless lords of storms, demanding bloody tribute. Like the Laestrygonians, the Fomorians combined chthonic power with insatiable bestial cruelty. Slavic legends vaguely mention the Voloks, a vanished race of mighty giants. Chronicles state that they retreated deep into the stone mountains, becoming part of the earth itself. Their fate eerily resembles the reclusion of the Laestrygonians in black rocks, where they securely hid their existence. Old Testament apocrypha tell of Near Eastern giants, the Nephilim. The similarity of their combat tactics to the Laestrygonians evokes chilling dread. Both of these cursed tribes used massive boulders as a perfect weapon of mass destruction, crushing entire armies into a bloody pulp. A deep study of the gruesome motif of cannibalism in myths about giants reveals a terrible truth. From snow-covered fjords to scorching deserts, entirely different continents have preserved the memory of colossal beings devouring human flesh. These are not just fairy tales, but an echo of a universal primal nightmare. Why did ancient cultures inextricably associate immense stature with cannibalism? Esotericists assert that a gigantic body required colossal life energy. Warm human flesh for them was not merely food, but sacred fuel, sustaining their cursed existence against the laws of nature. Grim Basque legends whisper of the Jötnar, wild giants of the Pyrenees. Like the Laestrygonians, they easily hurled heavy megaliths from mountain peaks onto strangers. Their incredible physical power and isolation in gorges perfectly replicate the ominous pattern established by the ancient myth. Across the ocean, Paiute Indian legends tell of red-haired cannibal giants from the Lovelock caves. They also drove their victims into traps and mercilessly devoured them in the darkness. This frightening coincidence makes one wonder, did all humanity face a single threat? The most frightening coincidence in these disparate legends is the use of entire rocks as weapons of mass destruction. Giants did not forge swords. They took the very earth and hurled it upon fragile ships, demonstrating their absolute contempt for any human civilization. In this context, the Laestrygonians act as a direct personification of the destructive, blind force of the sea and impregnable cliffs. They are the living embodiment of a merciless element that knows neither pity nor negotiation. Their wrath is as inevitable as a black storm breaking masts. Comparing their society to an ant colony evokes a special dread. The Laestrygonians attacked Odysseus's fleet with ruthless collective efficiency. No individual duels, only heavy stone strikes and the methodical, cold extermination of prey, as if they obeyed a single, ominous mind. The analysis of the frightening image of the giantess in world folklore finds its ideal embodiment in the wife of Chief Antiphates. Her colossal figure echoes Celtic goddesses of death and Norse giantesses, whose mere presence instantly froze the blood in the veins of brave warriors. This detail points to a deep, hidden connection between the most ancient matriarchal cults and primal chthonic monsters. Mother Earth, in her darkest, most destructive aspect, spawned insatiable devourers. Antiphates' wife embodies precisely this ruthless, primordial womb, demanding ever-new bloody sacrifices. The main difference between the Laestrygonians and the Olympian gods is the complete, terrifying absence of a divine spark. If deities were cruel but human-like in their passions, these giants remained merely blind instruments of fate. In their dead eyes, nothing shone but hunger. A similar motif resonates in African legends of forest giants. They silently glided among ancient trees, swallowing lost hunters whole. Like the Laestrygonians, they left no traces, turning the wild thicket into a deadly trap where cries were reliably muffled by the dark foliage. The study of the deadly ambush motif in a narrow gorge permeates all military history and mythology. Telepylos became the archetype of the perfect trap, a confined space from which escape is impossible and an enemy towering over you. This is a classic nightmare scenario, skillfully woven into ancient epic. The Laestrygonians appear before us as the absolute embodiment of civilized man's primal fear of wild, untamed nature. This is a dark reminder that beyond safe cities and well-trodden sea routes, ancient forces still lurk, ready to tear us to pieces. The grim symbolism of stone in this epic is terrifying in its inevitability. The dead, cold weight of rocks crashes down upon the living, warm wood of defenseless ships. The Laestrygonians do not forge metal. They use the very flesh of the earth to crush the fragile creations of human hands, grinding them to dust. Drawing parallels, we inevitably recall the biblical Goliath. But here, this image is elevated to an absolute, scaled to the size of an entire bloodthirsty people. Imagine not one giant, but hundreds of chthonic giants simultaneously hurling boulders. This is no longer a duel, but total annihilation. The Sumerian epic describes Humbaba, the terrifying guardian of the sacred cedar forest, whose roar was like a flood. The Laestrygonians also act as gruesome guardians of their lands. They protect not sacred groves, but their cursed domains, where every stranger becomes mere food for insatiable maw. In the chronicles of Telepylos lies the paradoxical motif of an endless day, where shepherds do not close their eyes and the sun burns continuously. This phenomenon echoes ancient Hyperborean myths. Light here brings no salvation. It merely exposes a merciless hunting cycle, depriving the victim of the saving darkness. Is there a mystical connection between the Laestrygonians and distant polar regions? Was it an error by ancient translators, or do the texts preserve an ancient, dark blood memory of creatures from eternal ice? The icy coldness of their hearts perfectly reflects this forgotten northern nature. Ancient geography always placed true monsters at the very edge of the oikomene, beyond the boundaries of the known world. The Laestrygonians dwell precisely where the power of the Olympian gods ends and primal chthonic laws begin. This is the boundary of reality, crossing which a mortal is doomed to certain agonizing death. In ancient Greek culture, the law of hospitality was sacred. The Laestrygonians, however, act as its absolute blasphemous antithesis. They do not offer bread and wine to the weary traveler, nor do they wash his feet. In their distorted world, the guest himself becomes an offering on the bloody altar of their hunger. This monstrous violation of sacred law plunged ancient listeners into primal dread. Devouring a guest instead of the traditional exchange of gifts is not merely savagery, it is the complete destruction of world order. The Laestrygonians negate all that is human, transforming the sacred ritual of encounter into a sordid act of cattle slaughter. The Greeks experienced similar horror only before the wild Thracian tribes, whose dark rituals included human sacrifices. But if the Thracians did this for their bloodthirsty gods, the Laestrygonians killed solely for satiation. Their god was their own bottomless, eternally rumbling stomach. If we open yellowed alchemical treatises, we will find clear parallels there. Ancient mystics directly equated the Laestrygonians with the crude, unyielding element of earth. They are the embodiment of heavy, inert matter, devoid of spiritual light, a blind mass capable only of destroying everything in its path. In popular consciousness, their image mystically intertwined with destructive earthquakes and sudden mountain collapses. When the earth trembled and rocks fell into the sea, people whispered that the Laestrygonians had come out to hunt again, Nature itself became their deadly, merciless weapon. In this blind fury, they are strikingly similar to the golems of Prague legends, a soulless stone mass driven only by a primitive instinct for destruction. There is no cunning or treachery in them, only raw, crushing power, whose icy breath cannot be stopped or appeased. Studying the chronicles, we find a gruesome motif of impalement. The Laestrygonians skewered slain sailors on enormous harpoons, like fish. This execution would be glorified millennia later by Vlad the Impaler, but its first creators, leaving a bloody trail, were precisely these dark, merciless giants. The piercing of living flesh holds deep ritual significance in the most ancient sacrificial cults. It is not merely killing, it is the ultimate subjugation of the victim, nailing them to the earth. The Laestrygonians did not just kill heroes, they ritually reduced them to the level of helpless, trembling prey. The deadly harbor of Telepylos itself is often compared in treatises to the gaping maw of a giant sea monster. The narrow entrance is its clenched jaws, and the quiet water is its bottomless gullet, ready to swallow any fleet. Nature here has become a devil's cauldron, where all is doomed. In this terrifying metaphor, the Laestrygonians themselves act as the merciless teeth of this maw. They stand on the edges of the cliffs and methodically, stone by stone, grind ships to splinters. No mercy, no negotiations, only the rhythmic, relentless crunch of breaking wood and tearing flesh. Here, clear parallels with Charybdis are visible. The same inevitable dragging of a fleet into a deadly vortex. But if Charybdis killed with the faceless element of water, here death was brought by a tangible force. The fleet was swallowed not by a dark abyss, but by cold stone and hungry flesh. If we look into the pages of darkened grimoires, we will find strict warnings. Magical treatises categorically forbid the summoning of Laestrygonian spirits. It is believed that their primal fury is so great that no protective circle can contain it when this dark, chthonic power breaks free. Medieval demonologists, not coincidentally, classified them as uncontrollable entities of a lower order. Unlike higher demons, it is impossible to make a pact with Laestrygonians or deceive them with a cunning oath. They are driven by only one instinct, an eternal, insatiable hunger that will devour even the most hapless conjurer without a trace. This insatiability links them to the Wendigo, gruesome hunger spirits from the forests of North America. Both myths describe creatures whose curse lies in the endless consumption of human flesh. In both cases, the monster's main weapon becomes a chilling terror that completely suppresses the will of the doomed victim. This coincidence of the motif of chilling, paralyzing horror is no accident. Like the spirits of winter forests, the Laestrygonians exude an aura of primal stupor that completely suppresses the victim's will. Sailors, driven into the narrow bay, did not try to fight. They were gripped by animal fear of the approaching heavy inevitability. Why did only Odysseus's single black ship miraculously escape the bloody trap from the entire Great Armada? The ancient epic provides a clear answer. The king of Ithaca, guided by a dark premonition, did not steer his vessel deep into the deceptively calm harbor, remaining by the outer rocks. The hero's cold, calculated caution here stands in stark contrast to his crew's fatal carelessness. While other captains joyfully moored their ships at Telepylos' stone docks, Odysseus tied his ship to a cliff as if he already foresaw that everything would end in a terrible massacre. An encounter with the Laestrygonians becomes the ultimate test of human reason in the face of brute, utterly insurmountable force. Where bronze swords and phalanx tactics are powerless, Only animal instinct and the readiness to cut mooring lines at any moment can save a life from certain doom. This episode eerily echoes the grim myth of the Cretan Minotaur. However, here we see a deadly labyrinth of sheer cliffs instead of constructed walls. Telepylos is a natural trap where the role of the bloodthirsty monster at its center is played by an entire nation of cannibal giants. The spring of Odysseus plays a key role in this trap. It appears as a deceptive, life-saving oasis in the cold desert of death. Sweet, icy water lures thirst-exhausted sailors, lulling their vigilance and making them forget that they have stepped onto cursed ground. We find a similar motif in ancient Celtic legends of dark fairies luring unwary travelers into hollow hills. There, enchanting music and sweet delicacies serve as bait, after which a mortal will never return to their homeland, becoming a prisoner of darkness. But there is one important and frightening difference. The Laestrygonians do not use complex magic of seduction or illusion. They rely solely on crude, reliable bait. Victims themselves wander into the giant's maw, drawn by basic instincts and the thirst for fresh, life-giving moisture. The ominous role of Chief Antiphates' daughter, who met the scouts at the spring, boils down to the function of a silent harbinger of inevitable doom. This gigantic maiden shows neither pity nor anger. She merely coldly points the way to the palace, where a bloody altar already awaits the guests. In conclusion, we see the frightening universality of the fear of cannibal giants throughout human history. Be they Greek Laestrygonians, Norse Jötnar, or Native American Wendigo, all reflect a single, deeply rooted terror in our subconscious of that which can tear us apart. Chapter 4. The Evolution of Fear. How did the myth of the Laestrygonians fare in subsequent, more enlightened centuries? When humanity learned to build enormous galleons and armed itself with gunpowder, the primal dread of unknown shores should have vanished, but the ancient nightmare merely took on a new form. Ancient Roman poets, like the great Ovid, began to skillfully transform this primal, bloody image. In their refined verses, the crude cannibals gradually acquired a mystical aura, becoming not just a physical threat, but a symbol of inevitable fate, pursuing anyone who dared to challenge the gods. There was a gradual transformation of the Laestrygonians from a real threat to seafarers into a deep philosophical metaphor for human cruelty. They became the embodiment of that dark, bestial side of the soul that awakens when the laws of civilization are erased. These are no longer just monsters, but a mirror of our own hidden madness. If one opens the grim pages of medieval bestiaries, one will find mention of the Laestrygonians in a completely new, unexpected role. Christian theologians classified them exclusively as demon masons, infernal servants who erect the black bastions of the underworld from the bones and souls of sinners cast into the abyss. Gruesome illustrations in the parchment manuscripts of reclusive monks depicted these giants as true spawn of hell. They were drawn with distorted, beast-like faces, covered in coarse fur, clutching bloody boulders in their clawed hands. These drawings captured the concentrated fear of the Dark Ages before ancient Chthonic evil. With the advent of the Age of Discovery, the image of the Laestrygonians once again gained frightening relevance. Seafarers venturing into unknown waters took with them not only astrolabes, but also old fears. Every secluded bay of a new continent seemed to them that very cursed Telepylos awaiting fresh blood. Renaissance cartographers, guided by superstitious dread, placed figures of cannibal giants on the unexplored wild territories of South America. Where precise coordinates ended, unknown lands began, inhabited by monsters ready to crush any European ship that dared to drop anchor in their grim, foggy fjords. This animalistic fear of the cannibals of the New World was skillfully fueled precisely by ancient myths. Conquistadors' tales of the brutal rituals of local tribes instantly superimposed themselves onto the images of the Laestrygonians. Europeans believed they had once again encountered that very race of giants devouring human flesh. Later, in the literature of the dark Romantic era, the Laestrygonians transformed into an absolute symbol of merciless, punishing nature. Mystic writers describe them as a primordial element knowing no quarter. They became the personification of blind fate, which grinds human pride and fragile wooden masts to dust. This myth also had a huge influence on classical Gothic literature. Blood-chilling stories of cursed castles where mysterious masters lure travelers to certain death all are direct descendants of the ancient terror of the secluded harbor of Telepylos, from which no one ever returned alive. In foggy Victorian England, this ancient image found a new, even more ominous embodiment. The Laestrygonians transformed into bloodthirsty monsters lurking in the impenetrable jungles of unexplored colonies. British seafarers shuddered at the prospect of encountering gigantic cannibals in the darkest fringes of the expanding empire. Soon, this primal motif migrated to the yellowed pages of early science fiction and cheap pulp magazines. Writers enthusiastically described lost worlds where monstrous giants still lay in wait for explorers. The ancient horror of Telepylos found a second wind under screaming covers for a hungry public. The Chthonic Laestrygonians had a truly colossal influence on the grim works of H.P. Lovecraft. In his chilling Cthulhu myths, the same primal dread of an irresistible alien force is clearly discernible. Lovecraftian deities, like Antiphates' giants, are utterly indifferent to the pathetic pleas of mortals. The Deep Ones and the cursed inhabitants of misty Innsmouth are direct spiritual heirs of the bloodthirsty denizens of Telepylos, an isolated coastal town where strangers face inevitable doom meticulously replicates the ominous topography of the ancient harbor. This archetype has firmly embedded itself in the very fabric of modern mythology. Thus, the motif of a closed, hostile community harboring blood-chilling secrets has forever taken root in modern pop culture. We still instinctively fear remote villages and isolated islands. Subconsciously, we expect that behind the unfriendly gazes of the locals lies the primal, insatiable hunger of the Laestrygonians. World cinema also could not bypass this gruesome legacy. From naive Italian peplums of the last century to modern, emphatically brutal horrors, the image of merciless giants continues to frighten audiences. Directors enthusiastically recreate that very atmosphere of hopelessness in narrow stone gorges. The iconic scene of the Achaean fleet's destruction became a true test for the creators of high-budget adaptations of Odysseus. Shots where heavy black boulders flying from cliffs shatter galleys and crimson water boils with screams are forever etched in memory. This is pure horror. Modern special effects have allowed a new perspective on this myth, forever changing our perception of their colossal stature. Now, on screen, we see not just tall people, but true chthonic monsters. Their every movement shakes the earth, and their roar makes blood run cold. This same image of merciless cannibal giants has organically woven itself into the fabric of modern fantasy literature. From Tolkien's cruel trolls to George R.R. Martin's fierce giants in icy wastes, the heavy breath of Antiphates is felt everywhere. Writers perfectly understand how powerfully this archetype affects the reader. In the interactive worlds of modern video games, monstrous bosses and enormous trolls have fully inherited the tactics of the Laestrygonians. When a rock torn from its roots flies at your hero, You experience the same fear as an ancient sailor whose ship was trapped in the cursed fjord. But if we delve into the deep psychological aspect, it becomes clear why the Laestrygonians still send shivers down our spines. It's not just their colossal size. They strike at the darkest point of our subconscious, awakening an ancient, long-forgotten animal instinct. This paralyzing fear of being eaten alive is one of humanity's oldest and deepest fears. To the Laestrygonians, we are not enemies, not prisoners, not even slaves. We are simply warm meat to them, devoid of any meaning or right to mercy. A particular horror is also inspired by the fact that outwardly, these giants still resemble humans. They have arms, legs, they build dwellings and light fires. Yet they are utterly devoid of any spark of compassion, transforming into a gruesome, distorted parody of the human race. Here, the frightening effect of the uncanny valley comes into play. We look at gigantic, crudely deformed humanoids and see in their features our own reflection, mercilessly disfigured by primal savagery. Their emotionless faces evoke deep revulsion at the most basic genetic level of our perception. Today, the Laestrygonians can be seen as a grim metaphor for a soulless industrial machine that methodically grinds human destinies. This image perfectly describes a blind, crushing system where an individual is merely an insignificant grain of sand caught in merciless millstones. It is impossible to escape or hide from it. This ancient myth has found its gruesome reflection in modern dark painting and detailed digital art. Visionary artists depict gigantic dark silhouettes towering over tiny ships in narrow stone gorges. Each such canvas is literally imbued with a thick, suffocating atmosphere of inevitable doom. These frightening illustrations perfectly convey that oppressive atmosphere of the secluded, bloody fjord. Looking at them, the viewer feels as if they are on the deck of a doomed galley. They feel the icy wind of Telepylos and hear the ominous creak of heavy stones in the giant's hands in the distance. Even in dark ambient music, this gruesome image is increasingly used. Composers create dense, resonant soundscapes, imitating the booming footsteps of giants and the dull thuds of falling rocks. This music plunges the listener into a primal trance, making the heart pound with fear. Such an audiovisual embodiment of paralyzing fear of encroaching darkness hits home without fail. It resurrects memories of times when our distant ancestors hid in caves, listening to the heavy footsteps of unknown predators. The Laestrygonians are the quintessence of fear of that which is larger and stronger than us. And even today, desperate cryptozoologists continue to seek real evidence of the existence of this race of giants. They fanatically study ancient bones and dubious chronicles, hoping to find at least one fossilized fang. They are driven by the same insane hope of touching a forbidden, frightening secret. The countless fake photographs of gigantic skeletons circulating online are no accident. They are a strange, distorted echo of that very ancient myth. Our minds still cling to the blurred shadows of the Laestrygonians, trying to find physical confirmation for them in the digitized world. The psychology of the crowd holds a grim paradox. We subconsciously yearn to believe in the reality of these bloodthirsty monsters. Deep down, humanity fears being the sole crown of creation. We vitally need to know that something in the dark abyss surpasses us in strength. This need for absolute, unfathomable evil is ingrained in us from birth. The Laestrygonians serve as an ideal moral contrast to fragile human civilization. Without their primal, dark fury, our own laws and virtues seem devoid of all meaning, dissolving into a gray void. The giants serve as a cruel reminder of our incredible physical fragility. We erect proud cities of steel, but in the face of the universe's true, ancient power, we remain merely a cluster of trembling creatures. A single hurled boulder easily grinds all our fragile grandeur to dust. Our complete loss of connection with wild nature makes this dormant fear even sharper. Hiding behind concrete walls, we have forgotten the smell of fresh blood on the wind. But genetic memory has not disappeared. It lives and pulsates in our veins. This ancient myth subtly flowed into modern urban legends about cannibalistic maniacs lurking in impenetrable wild forest depths. Nameless giants changed their appearance, but the essence remained the same: a merciless, hungry force that silently watches you from dense, dark thickets. The popular plot trope of taking a wrong turn is merely a modern interpretation of that very fateful entry of galleys into the cursed bay of Telepylos. Doomed tourists blindly repeat the fate of ancient sailors, entering an isolated world where laws do not apply and death is absolutely inevitable. All of pop culture is permeated by this motif. Excessive curiosity and arrogant carelessness always lead to cruel punishment. He who dares to cross the boundaries of an alien, forbidden realm will surely pay with his flesh. Humanity learned this harsh lesson on the shores of the bloody Fjord. Surprisingly, humanity's most ancient epic continues to powerfully dictate its harsh rules to the entire modern horror genre. The laws of survival, written on yellowed parchments, still work today. Darkness remains just as merciless, and salvation is granted only to those who maintain a cool head. The image of the Laestrygonians has gained frightening immortality in our collective unconscious. They are the embodied primal horror that cannot be erased by centuries of progress or the bright light of neon lamps. The giants have securely hidden in the darkest corners of our minds, awaiting their hour. But let's return to the beginning. Imagine. The last screams have faded, and a heavy, dead silence has descended upon the bloody waters of the secluded bay. Fragments of masts slowly sway on the leaden waves. The monster's feast is over, and only crimson foam remains as a reminder of the ancient fleet's demise. The most gruesome thought is that somewhere on Earth, this hidden fjord of Telepylos still exists. The geography of our world conceals many white spots. Perhaps the rocky gates still await lost ships, shrouded in an impenetrable veil of eternal fog and ancient charms. These ancient black stones are truly alive. They have forever absorbed the death cries of doomed sailors and the dull crunch of breaking ship pines. The basalt cliffs remember the taste of spilled blood, and this dark memory makes them stronger than any forged human steel. This is a grim warning to all modern seafarers who too arrogantly rely solely on satellites and radar. Electronics inevitably go blind in the face of Chthonic magic. Instruments will not show you the death lurking in the darkness until a colossal shadow blocks the light of the guiding stars. There is one immutable truth recorded in ancient secret grimoires. Some dark secrets of the ocean should never be revealed. Human curiosity often becomes our executioner. The depths of the waters and hidden fjords hold that which can drive absolutely any researcher mad. The blood-chilling truth is that the Laestrygonians did not die out at all. They did not turn to dust like other mythical creatures. These giants simply retreated into the shadows, merged with the black rocks, and patiently lay in wait, silently observing our fragile ships. For centuries, they wait motionless in the darkness. They await the moment when humanity once again becomes weak enough, divided, and careless. When we forget ancient amulets and lose respect for the sea, their heavy footsteps will once again shake the coast, demanding their fresh flesh. Look at these cliffs, a thick, unnaturally cold fog slowly creeps over the water, reliably concealing the black rocks from your sight. It is like a living shroud, blurring the lines between reality and gruesome myth. The Bay of Telepylos once again plunges into its impenetrable gloom. Do you hear it? That sudden, distant splash, and then a dull, unbearably heavy thud of an enormous stone against the black water. This is not merely a trick of your imagination. It is an echo breaking through millennia to remind you the masters of the cursed fjord are still here, hidden in the darkness. Remember forever, ancient myths are not harmless children's stories at all. They are warnings written in blood by our wise ancestors. They left us these signs so that we might survive. To ignore their messages is to voluntarily surrender your body to be torn apart by monsters. Therefore, when you one day find yourself on the shores of a quiet, deserted bay, listen carefully. If dark waves crash against the rocks with an unnatural, heavy hum, and birds suddenly fall silent, do not wait. Flee before a colossal black shadow obscures the entire sun. Telepylos awaits. Look into the impenetrable gloom of that gaping coastal cave. Where light fades, ancient horror awakens. From the damp void, the unblinking yellow gaze of burning eyes is already fixed on you. The gigantic tribe still guards its cursed, blood-soaked domains, anticipating warm flesh. The Laestrygonians have not vanished. They have merely bided their time, awaiting their hour. Someday, their black basalt rocks will again be mercilessly stained crimson. And for now, take care and steer clear of dark waters. And remember, in this ringing silence, you are never alone. They are near.